So this next panel, it's going to be a discussion about the next generation of libertarians. And with us to discuss this topic, we have Adam Bartha from the UK. He's the director of Epicenter, a network of free market think tanks from across Europe. Adam also serves as the director of the international outreach at the Institute of Economic Affairs, which is the oldest free market think tank in Britain. We also have with us here Jakub Bilski from Poland. He's a social media content creator, journalist, member of Students for Liberty, an advocate for freedom in the context of modern technologies. So to kick this off, I would like to discuss this notion that we have that we often hear that Gen Z generation, they are usually very hard left. They're all socialists. They all hate capitalism, and it's hopeless. But what I would like to ask you guys is this so? Or is this maybe a distorted perception? And maybe we have more people than we think who are maybe leaning libertarian.
Thank you so much, dear. It's a pleasure to be part of the conversation. Although there are not many free market think tanks, the I is not the only one in the UK, just to clarify. We are the oldest one, but not the only one. Coming to your question about, is Gen Z really that bad? I'm not part of Gen Z, so I don't feel that insulted. But I think every single generation likes to complain about the younger generations after them, right? If you look at Socrates and Plato, they were already complaining about, these youngsters, they're really just, not as good as we were back in the days. I disagree with that. I'm a short-term pessimist, but I'm definitely a long-term optimist. And if you actually look at the trajectory of political opinions in Gen Z, it's actually quite divided. So there's a very good Financial Times article and poll from a couple of weeks ago that outlines essentially the big gender divide in Gen Z. If you look at young male voters in the UK, in Germany, in the United States, they remain roughly stable between the right-wing and the left-wing divide. So on aggregate, the generation 20, 30 years ago, between the age group of 20 and 30, young males are pretty much the same as they were 30, 40 years ago. It's a very different picture with young women. And I think it's worth asking why. So I think probably the whole Me Too campaigns and scandals 7, 8 years ago had a pretty big impact. So if you look at the political opinions of young women, in the last 10 years, really 20, 30 percentage points, they're more left-leaning, more progressive than their male counterparts in the same age cohort. And I think it's worth asking for libertarians, for us, what we can do in order to get a lot of those dissatisfied young women into our groups. I mean, if you look at our political opinions, we are very progressive on a lot of social issues. These young women may disagree with us on a lot of economic questions, but on social questions, on immigration policy, on kind of human rights, on equal rights between men and women, equal rights between gays and straights, I think we very much agree with this cohort. So it's very worthwhile asking what we can do in order to attract these young women and make sure that they consider some libertarian principles in their political opinions.
Okay, thank you, Adam. And you, Jakub, you are maybe you could consider yourself Gen Z. You are.
Yeah.
So maybe you have some insights that other folks like us don't.
In my opinion, the situation depends on the country because when we see election results, for example, in UK, I saw that in last elections in July, Labour Party get about 50% in Gen Z. Of course, Labour Party is like left-wing, I guess. But still, I think this results of the Labour Party was caused that people were just tired of Tories, for example. The same situation in the U.S. elections last week. Young voters voted for Kamala Harris more than for Donald Trump. I think maybe it was some kind of propaganda made by celebrities that were popular in young voters. I can also give you an example from Poland. In 2019 elections, left-wing party was so popular in youngest voters, but it changed after 5 years because some parties, let's say more center-left, center, took some points of left-wing party program. I mean, these issues of abortion, gay marriages, and what happened? Actually, left-wing party lost voters. These voters came to this center-left, center parties, and that's why I think that young voters are maybe, let's say, more focused on social issues, maybe not economic issues, because there was a research about the voters of left-wing party in Poland that actually the voters of the left-wing party are one of the most supportive for the economic freedom. It's like some kind of paradox. But they are supporting left-wing party because of the issues, for example, of the abortion, LGBTQ rights, and something like that.
Okay, thank you. I want to go back to something that you were saying, Adam, that we sometimes fail to make our message a little bit more appealing to certain demographics. So I would like to ask you guys, in general, like how attractive, how appealing is a libertarian message to a young audience, and maybe what we could do better to make it more, a bit more attractive.
We're doing well in one area, which is, I think, the social part. If we talk about equal rights, if we talk about immigration policy, kind of the open-mindedness towards new things, libertarian ideas are pretty popular. As Jakub mentioned, I think we are not losing ground on that front. The difficulty is on the economic front. I think a lot of free market ideas are counterintuitive. If you come from a reasonably well-off family and you see poverty and suffering, it's kind of humans are social animals. We want to help people. And obviously it seems extremely kind of intuitive to say, okay, well, the government should be helping people. Government should step in and make sure that those unfortunate or less fortunate people around me have at least a decent life. The big question is how we can have that social, I think, positive feeling translated into free market principles. How we can explain that we need prosperity, we need wealth, we need economic growth in order to enable all sorts of people to live a more prosperous life. Why it's better to focus on private charity instead of government-run charity. I think a lot of the economic principles behind libertarianism are kind of counterintuitive. So we need to be a little bit topical, and we need to use issues that are currently prevalent in society and kind of use those daily examples to explain some of the core libertarian principles, because it takes a bit of time. I think free market economics, or economics as I would call it, it is not necessarily the easiest kind of principle to understand. So if we do a better job in kind of nitpicking the examples from daily life and then link it to libertarian principles, I think we're going to have a better chance of getting a wider audience for some of our ideas.
I think that young people are not involved in the economic issues. I think it's also because that they're not even, let's say, they're studying, they're not working, they're not even familiar with, for example, tax issues, even trade issues or something like that. They're just focusing on those things that they are like more close to them. For example, let's say even drug policy, as I said before, this abortion, LGBTQ rights, because it's so popular on social media among the some celebrities, and that's why I think that also, let's say in the Western world, young people have a in generally good life, and don't care about economics. I think so. That's why I think libertarians have this problem to focus this people more on economic issues, because sometimes people don't even see where is the problem.
Just to disagree a little bit about young people not caring about economics, I think they may not care about economic principles, but they care about economic impacts on their lives. So I think the housing crisis is a very good example. I live in London, United Kingdom, where every single year my rents were going up double digits. Every single year for the last 12 years. It turns a lot of young people extremely skeptical about free markets, simply because they see, okay, well, the prices are going up. My landlord is charging me through the roof. It's the fault of markets because, well, these landlords are allowed to charge whatever they like. Unfortunately, they often don't make the second step and say, why are there so few landlords in the UK? Well, because the government bans house building. It's literally illegal to build a house in 99.9% of the United Kingdom. So I think young people do care about the economic impact on them. It's a bit more tricky to make the next step and explain the economic principles behind some of the bad policies that we currently have. But if we do a better job on that front, I think more and more people will realize that, yes, free market economic principles can help in their daily lives.
I would also say that there's something, because I think that's okay. People are young people already just care about, for example, prices of houses and something like that. But it's cost because some kind of let's say anti-capitalist propaganda that is on the media, and, for example, made by left, and that's why young people are just focusing on these issues that left is trying to make this just trying to say that, oh, capitalism is bad because something was wrong, and that's why young people just know only those things that are bad right now. They're just not focusing what caused that we have wealthy nations right now. So yeah.
Is one of the challenges, perhaps, when I mean, in general, but I think young people in particular, we speak about winning hearts and minds, and a challenge I think people like us who advocate for free markets always had is that in order to explain and defend free markets, we have to appeal to very rational arguments, and those don't always resonate with people, especially young people. So maybe is it a matter of finding and fine-tuning the language that would make those principles more appealing to them?
Or, I mean, we are in a group of political animals, and I'm like one of them. So it's hard for me to say. But we should stop talking about principles that often. We should really talk about very concrete solutions first, and then second, link it to principles, right? If we just bang on about constantly libertarian principles, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for the socialists neither. If the commies would be just banging on constantly about, oh, the great Marxist ideas, it doesn't work. I think you have to make it as relevant to the daily lives of people as possible. And there are so many great examples where free market policies work well. I mean, if you look at, I'm originally from Budapest, Hungary, and Tom Palmer outlined the current political struggles in Hungary, which I couldn't agree with more. But if you look historically, 90s, 2000s, early 2010s, my country developed immensely because it moved away from the centralizing nature of government planned economy towards a freer market. Not a perfect market, not a totally free market, not a libertarian paradise in any way, a freer market. So my generation lives in incomparable economic prosperity compared to my parents' and grandparents' generations. And these very, very direct and very comparable points, I think they explain almost themselves without principles, without the economics, without the libertarian principles in detail, because you can pinpoint, would you rather live in today's Poland or the Poland of the 1980s? And I think young people will massively agree that today's Poland is a much, much better place than whatever was there under communist
But
times.
it's the paradox in Poland because, of course, we agree that we have better times than communist times, but still people that are just complaining that free market reforms were just, it's like a very bad capitalism came into Poland. But actually, when we saw the statistics, this bad capitalism made this Poland wealthy. When we're comparing Ukraine or Belarus to Poland, we see why this bad capitalism is actually not bad capitalism.
Thanks. So moving on, in your opinion or your experience, more like, what are the ways in which you have seen that people have sort of approached the libertarian movement or have arrived at libertarian ideas? Like, what's the process you have usually observed in people around you?
Actually, I think that the most, let's say, attractive to people to bring them to libertarianism is just giving them examples from our lives, how we are living. As it was said before, not focus on the principles, but just giving them examples. How does it work? If you will be focusing, for example, on let's say, speeches of great thinkers of libertarianism, of course, they are really important, but they lived in a different times. They had different solutions, but now we had different problems. We need different solutions, and that's why we have to, let's say, focus on a more practical aspect of libertarianism right now, and that's what brings people closer to those ideas, I guess.
And to add to Jakub's point, community building. What brought me into the whole libertarian word back in the days was Students for Liberty. I think they do a fantastic job of finding these handful of people on various university campuses and connecting them. And from that handful of people, back in the days, I was at the University of Sheffield, where we had 9 different Marxist societies because they all disagreed with one another on the interpretation of Marxism.
Python.
Yeah, exactly. But we didn't have a single libertarian society. And through help from the Institute of Economic Affairs and from Students from Liberty, we set up the first F.A. Hayek Society with 3 friends of mine. Right? These were the only kind of semi-libertarians I knew on the campus. But this mini society grew and grew throughout the years, got more support. We invited some fantastic libertarian speakers, and it became a mini community in and of itself. I think that's extremely important for young people to be feeling that they're part of something. And if we're able to help them with resources from, whether it's reading materials, whether it's invitation to some of the bigger conferences internationally, I think this community building, bottom-up community building, can really, really be impactful. And if I look back now with 15 years behind me, a lot of these people are now entrepreneurs. A lot of these people work for big companies, but the core libertarian principles and ideas that we have shared back then, they're still part of their daily lives.
Yeah, and also, that's this kind of participating in those projects, conferences. It's like young people really love having adventures. I mean, just traveling the world, knowing new people. It's so great, experience. For example, like a conference like this, but also many projects that are being made in Poland. For example, a project of Polish American Leadership Academy, journalist school of Henry Hazlitt is being made by the Freedom and Entrepreneurship Foundation. Also Project Arizona, which we have students here, so it's really great experience. Also Liberty camps. So yeah, that's really great to bring those people, even connecting them free time and experiencing libertarianism. It's a really great way of spending time.
Now, something I have observed, I mean, I don't know how true this is, that I have found that oftentimes the people who become libertarians have been, even before reading anything, intuitively sort of leaning libertarian, even if they didn't know it. And recently we were talking with some of my colleagues about this book from Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind, how different personality types can be sort of like a predictor of like what sort of political ideology you were following. So have you find that to be true in your experience, that there are certain personalities that are more prevalent in the libertarian world, and maybe there's a way to make the ideas more appealing to people who maybe don't fit that personality type?
I think we are a bit too contrarian. No, we are often very, kind of personalized, right? Even when I was a kid, I just loved saying no to things, right? Whether it's my parents, whether teachers, etc. If I didn't like something, my inherent intuitive feeling was just, no, I want to do it differently. I think a lot of people are a bit more social, a bit more, less contrarian than we are. So I often have to stop myself and just take a breath and then start indulging an argument, a political argument with a friend who's not a libertarian. And I think this open-mindedness and patience and trying not to be self-righteous about our own opinions helps a lot. Fair enough, we are right. That's the first step. We have the right political beliefs and ideology. But it's not enough to be right. We have to persuade the majority of the population because we believe in liberal democracy. People vote. We want to make sure that as wide a group of people believe in our ideas as possible. And in order to do that, I think we need to be a bit more open-minded and a listening mood first, and then talking mood second when it comes to engagement with political opponents, or not even necessarily political opponents, but people who don't agree with our principles yet. And given my job, I spend most of my time in the Brussels bubble, bureaucratic Brussels bubble. 99.9% of the people I talk with disagree with me on pretty much every kind of economic principle. So it takes a bit of time to get adjusted to this mentality and not be hostile towards people who don't share your opinions. But I think especially when reaching out to young audiences, university campuses, etc., we have to be very open-minded and very patient and kind of bring them along on our journey rather than attack them for having the false political opinions.
And yeah, as I said before, giving people the examples of our lives, it's even better than just talking about the theory of libertarianism. It's like if people will see that something is really possible, if they will see that that we already did something connected with liberty, they will just think how maybe I will do also the same thing, and they'll be maybe convinced one day. It's not like in one day, from one day we will be convinced all the half of the population. But if we convince one person, this person will convince another person, and then we'll see. Maybe one day we have majority of liberty lovers.
Nice. So currently, how active would you say young libertarians are these days? How excited, how motivated are they, to promote the ideas, to be engaged and involved in the libertarian movement?
Oh, actually, I think that depends on the country because threats to the freedom in the US, in European Union countries, but also in Ukraine or Georgia are completely different. And of course, the idea of freedom is universal, but solutions to get the freedom are different. And that's the point that, of course, we have global community of libertarians, but also there is so important to maintain these local communities that will understand in the best way what's the issue with each country. They will understand the needs of the young people, the actually all the population. So yeah, as I said, it depends on the country. We don't have like one answer, I think.
And just to highlight a couple of examples. So we in a previous sessions, there was a bit of discussion about Georgia, Georgia, the country, rather than the US states. As Jakub mentioned, I mean, the fight is extremely different throughout different parts of the globe. What our Georgian friends at Students for Liberty are doing, for example, day and night, organizing themselves to help the protests against the government that's trying to go down on a Putinist Russian route. It's extremely impressive. It has really become their daily life to fight for classical liberal libertarian principles. I think in a lot of Western European countries, we're extremely spoiled, reasonably high standards of living, reasonably free societies. It is not necessarily a daily fight for most libertarian students to really endorse libertarian principles. It's probably a good thing, but I worry that, in critical moments, people come together and can do great things, but it's also possible to slide back on the scale of freedom. I think when my country of birth, Hungary, joined the European Union and NATO and implemented a lot of liberalizing free market policies in the late 90s and early 2000s, we all thought, okay, the fight is won. We're going to be living in free and prosperous societies. That's the end of the story. If you like, it's the end of history. As Fukuyama said, there is nothing more to be done. Oh boy, we were wrong. We were massively wrong. I think it's worth not forgetting that the fight for human liberation and our daily liberties, it's an ongoing struggle. You have to make sure, even in the oldest liberal democracy of the United Kingdom, that you fight for the principles that you believe in, because then government rules can come in, oppressing free speech, and then you start slowly but surely sliding back on the scale of freedom. So yes, some of our libertarian friends in Georgia, Ukraine, etc., are doing an amazing day-to-day fight for our values, but the rest of us living in the freest societies of the planet, we still have a long way to go, and we shouldn't just take our freedoms granted as they are. We should continuously fight for our own ideas and principles.
Yeah, I totally agree. I have observed something very similar to what you guys have commented on, because I have spoken with libertarians from Western Europe and, from Germany, from the UK, and they often tell me, they're familiar with the libertarian movement in Latin America, and they always tell me how much more active and passionate people in Latin America seem compared to them, and how hard it is to promote these ideas in Europe, because like you said, people have become maybe a little bit more complacent, and they're not that interested in hearing our message. So yeah, that contrast is certainly there. It depends where people are from, how motivated they are. So Adam, in your case, you run a network of free market think tanks. So as of late, like in the last few years, have you observed more people joining the ranks, becoming more interested? What's your insight?
Europe is a difficult one from one main perspective, which is demography. Here in the United States, there is a growing population. In almost every single European country, there is a shrinking population, which means more and more old people and fewer young people. That has, I think, a massive impact, not just economically, but also culturally, on how Europe thinks about risks, how Europe thinks about innovation, how Europe thinks about the future. And I think it is a difficulty for the European classical liberal movement to bring the same numbers as 20 years ago or 30 years ago, on the dawn of free societies in Eastern Europe, simply because, first of all, we thought the fight is partially won, but second of all, there are simply fewer young people around. So what I see is really kind of small, very committed groups of people in various European countries. I mean, there are some fantastic Serbian groups, there are fantastic Portuguese and Spanish and Polish groups, and they are these nuggets of changes that we can see, that they actually manage to campaign for drug liberalization. They manage to campaign for more open immigration systems where people can start working as refugees instead of being banned from work up until the application is processed. So there are some positive examples that we have seen from across Europe in recent years. I think the big struggle for us will be this kind of cultural change of how we can embrace more risk, how we can embrace more innovation, which I think the Americans, you guys here, struggle less with, simply because it's more in the spirit of the American mentality to take a risk and then fail and then stand up, try again, and then hopefully succeed. So what I see in Europe with young people is just really encouraging them to take risks in their personal and professional lives, maybe try an entrepreneur-minded route in their professional life, and not just stick to big companies or government jobs. And I think if we manage to make that argument in Europe, that risk-taking is inherently a good part of life, then despite the demographic challenges, we're going to have a lot of young people doing amazing things. But it's not an easy one.
So how have you found young people to be receptive to that message of like risk taking? And
I think Jakub from Poland could tell a lot of fantastic examples. I think if you look at the kind of entrepreneurs coming out of Eastern Europe today, with a lot of startups from the Baltics, from Czechia, from Poland, you really see that there's a driving force of younger entrepreneurs trying to make a change and often succeeding. In Western Europe, maybe it's a bit more tricky.
Yeah, I think that actually a whole let's say community of libertarians, let's say even I would say the entrepreneurs of idea in Poland. Of course, it's let's say even thousands of people, but most of them, they're just doing things on the internet. They're just commenting on the social media, and that's all. And when it comes to just to come somewhere, for example, for a conference, to some meetups in cities, they don't come. They won't come. Why? Probably, I would say that people are some kind of lazy in those times, unfortunately, because when we had the pandemic, there was a really big, let's say, wave of political youth organizations in Poland. But after pandemic, most of them collapsed because everyone just came back to the everyday life. No one sits at the same time as before. So yeah, there is a problem. There is a problem to engage those people. But still, I think there is a hope that can be done better. For example, we are engaging them, for example, this activities, as I said before, this project conferences. If we just show them there's some kind of benefits in getting, for example, knowledge of new people, new experiences, I think it's still possible to just let's say take them from the computer and place them in the real world.
But how much do we, just to challenge you a little, how much do we need to take them away from the computer? I mean, if you're part of a lot of group chats today, a lot of the ideas, a lot of the innovation, a lot of the community building is happening online. So I think, you know, we can be always a bit optimistic and be like, okay, we can drag people to where we are and make sure that they come to conferences, in-person meetings. But why not flip it the other way? Why don't we go to the places where people already are, which is, I think nowadays, a lot of private forums and group chats, and make sure that our content is much better equipped and our ideas are much better equipped to that sort of communication style.
I think that people just have many ideas, but they don't know how to just make them. I mean, they don't have many, let's say, money or something like that. It's hard to explain because I met many people that had an idea, but it was also idea. So, yeah.
How to make the ideas happen. That's always a challenge, but
Yeah, although there is something to what you're saying, Adam, about going to where people are, in terms of like social media forums, because my parents, they started to be active long time ago in the 70s in the libertarian movement in Argentina, and for a long time it was very hard to sort of recruit new people into the movement. But when I sort of participated in this experience maybe 10 years ago to try to build a libertarian party, a lot of the people who arrived of different ages, I would say 80-90% of them told me, oh, I arrived at these ideas online. I would have never even known that they existed if I haven't found something online.
absolutely. And I think there is a growing realization within our movement that the type of videos we create, the type of podcast, the type of direct one-to-one online challenges and conversations that we're having, they can translate into real world impact. They don't always do, but they can.
Yeah, because a lot of the material, when it was only like physical, it was, very few people had access to that. But online, people found, videos, books, and that really helped a lot of people to educate themselves, pretty much.
And that's why we also, I mean, the Institute of Economic Affairs, it's an old think tank, right? So we publish a lot of books and we do a lot of research, but we also do a lot of micro grants internationally, supporting organizations that not just translate our books, but essentially create 1-2 minute videos out of them, create in-person conversations and discussions, create almost kind of TikTok style debates out of them. So there are so many ways that libertarian ideas can be shared. And if we're doing always a bit of trial and error to see what works and what doesn't, but it's not just in-person conferences and it's not just lengthy books that can reach people. In fact, it's probably the opposite. I think if I look at my younger brother, who is Gen Z, the number of books that he read, well, it's not quite the same as I did. And that's fine. I think he gets his information from totally different sources. But we need to be where the people are. And that's often online.
Yeah, I totally agree. Jakub, let me ask you something, because it's a conversation that I've had with people your age from Eastern Europe, or from Georgia, from Poland, like countries that were under the Soviet bloc. And what I've asked, and I would like to know your opinion, is now that the sort of the memory of the communist days is like farther behind, in your opinion, like people your age, like how do what's their perception of socialism these days? Is that something maybe they're not taking as seriously, maybe because now it feels like the distant remote past, or there is still an awareness of those days?
I think that this sentiment of communist times is really a rare situation because, of course, we have, as I said before, some kind of left-wing communities that they are saying some kind of or during communist times everyone had a apartment, renting prices were lower or something like that. They also were telling us that this bad capitalism destroyed the Polish economy, which is actually a lie. But to be honest, no. I think that's, if you see also the results of elections, actually there is no such a party who would be like, oh, communist times were perfect, good, and actually, actually every party that is in Poland is okay. Communist was. We don't want to. It's back. So yeah.
So you would say there's still a general distrust of communism even among people your age?
A bit. People know that communism was bad. Communist times were horrible to hold the Eastern Bloc, but most of the people are just trying to push all those ideas that will just continue these reforms that were started during the 1990s, 80s. Of course, as I said, there are some people who are just telling that, so we had some good times in communism, but they are minority.
Okay. So, and have you found that maybe the socialists have tried to repackage their ideas in a way that seem more appealing and not so connected to the old days? You know.
Of course. For example, the governing Communist Party, which was governing Poland for about 45 years, they disbanded this party in I guess 1990, and actually they established Social Democratic Party of Poland, and their successors are still in parliament. But I guess that's still those like present left is like more focused on social democracy, because it's like a new generation of those people. They know that communism was bad in their like majority of those parties. Of course, there are like a small margin of like extremists, but it's like common thing.
Okay, so my next question, maybe the last before we turn it over to the audience, and you both of you have brushed over this topic a little bit. What is it that maybe we are not doing when appealing to young people? To try to promote our ideas. Are there strategies that we should maybe be pushing harder that we are not trying? I mean, you mentioned, like, for example, that sometimes, libertarians can come in a little bit too hard and maybe not, and not maybe, be a little bit more open-minded, although maybe that's happening already. But what do you think that we can improve, that we can do better?
Sometimes in bad crowds. If libertarians hang out with people who actually do not like individual liberty, they just use libertarian principles to further their own political agenda, then we're going to make it a lot more difficult for us in the long term to actually stick to our values and principles. When my Prime Minister Viktor Orban is touring the United States and talks about low taxes and low regulation, etc., and then often I see some libertarian organizations endorsing his message and saying, be more like Hungary. It's a horrible message. Hungary is not a libertarian paradise in any way. So we need to think twice when we are hanging out with politicians. And we need to think very hard and strong how they are using the libertarian brand in order to further their own agenda. So being in bad crowds, I think, really, really harms our long-term principles and long-term viability.